I want to just address one or two basic things, maybe talk about the institutions that we find are failing around us. And we know we've inherited them from the British. The format, essentially, that you have a building, it's an impressive building always, there's a board of trustees, and then there's some sort of a research or performance or perhaps some data bank or collection that one goes to see. And I think more or less after independence, we have the institutions that we've put up, cultural institutions, are more or less the same actually. I don't think we've really managed to reformulate what we got as an idea of an institution, cultural institution, because essentially a cultural institution is a prescriptive institution. Why it has its origins in what Europeans did was that somewhere along in the 19th century, the European mindset became prescriptive because of its colonization. And it began to treat people from distant lands, but also their own people, as patients, which needed to be prescribed ways of thinking and ways of seeing. This prescriptive approach remains with us. We actually treat, when you set up a cultural institution, you are, by its very nature, implying that you are going to treat the community at large as patients who will come in to improve their minds. Now, there are serious problems with that. Because it's based on a kind of intellectual understanding that the world is moving on and a lot of things are getting destroyed, therefore we are going wrong somewhere. If I look at India today, I don't find that. I find it enormously energetic. It's destroying a lot of junk. It's chucking aside all sorts of rubbish. And it is corrupt. It is absorbing at a terrific rate from everything that's around it. So I don't see that this society needs prescription at all. The very notion that we should then pass some kind of judgments upon the process of development itself is, to me, highly questionable. And it also brings one to think, if one is to set up a cultural institution, what is the role of that cultural institution? I think, let me just address what I think are the problems. Because a society that's developing in Asia, the rate we are developing, and there's no knowing how long this will last. It's a cycle, so it can't last forever. Does have problems. So we can talk about that. One of the and I'm talking about cultural institutions. To me, one of the basic problems is how do we now store and have random free access to creative knowledge. In the pre-colonial days, we had oral traditions and we had memory banks in each individual. Those don't exist anymore. They exist, but they're not available for particular areas of knowledge anymore. They're much freer now. We've inherited the great skills and spaces that are needed to store objects. We have lots of places to store objects, archives objects. It's very easy to create spaces in buildings and institutions to store objects. And it's very easy to also express concern about the decay and the need to conserve because society is moving on and the old is getting destroyed and history is getting destroyed and knowledge is getting destroyed. Or rubbish. I don't think you have to save anything, frankly. Because what you have to save is knowledge. Objects are themselves. We rename a road because we haven't been able to build a new one. So we have a great leader who dies, and for the 10th time we rename a road, right? Because in the middle of Delhi or in the middle of Bombay, we need to say, address this important thing. Because if our contemporary ability to not create something of significance, which is of greater significance than has been done in the past, then I think we should be obsessed with keeping what the past has kept for us, preserved by time. Um, because we get into a peculiar situation. You take something like Fatehpur Sikri, I'm an architect giving this knowledge. So what is left are the palaces. Where did everybody stay? Nothing is left of it. So we are going to form, as is in every history book, that here is the city of the Mughals. Rubbish, it's a court. There's no city there anymore. So it gives us a completely falsified understanding of knowledge. So preserving stuff has enormous dangers to it. But knowledge, no. So the first problem is, how do we store knowledge? How do we make it accessible in today's world? The second knowledge I think that Neville has dealt with is the generation of funds through creative activity. Enormous challenge and many ways to do it. And the third problem for me is a very critical one. How does one address the problem of constant change? The change of context, change of society, change of money, change of people. And how does one safeguard the institution against the idiosyncrasies of its directors or its boards? So normal pattern is that you set up a charter. If you take the European tradition, who were faced with the same problem, they set up a charter. And they say, right, this is the charter, this is the principles for which the board stands, and if the institution stands, and we don't counter them. Next level down is the board decisions. So you have a whole hierarchy of capsules which are supposed to be touched only by some and not by others. Now, I don't understand in today's 21st century what is kinetic and what is static, what is permanent. What is the principle that you have to put down in a charter? And what is the principle that you can overrule and change as the requirements change? And the fourth one is, to me, the most important is, how does one address the relationship between the institution you're creating and the community at large? And this is where the prescription will come in. Because prescription will come in when you regulate who can come in, when you regulate who can access your institution, when you regulate who can be successful in the vision that they have and they want to use your institution for doing something. These are very prescriptive things. And some completely different way has to be found to be able to share the institutional infrastructure, to make it available for random creative people who might walk off the street or whatever. And that you minimize the filtering process, or you have a filtering process which is much more open and goes through a time process. Because creative talent is by its nature dynamic, so it doesn't reveal itself in the beginning of a time process. Like a film director may make a great film in the third film he makes. So in these institutions where fledgling creative minds are trying to access infrastructure of an institution, very often that those minds are very sensitive and unable to give their best when they apply or they try their first attempts. And these are, I'm not putting forward problems which are insoluble. I'd like to look at Ocean myself as an alternative course. At least I think we have an opportunity for not taking prescriptive a prescriptive role in culture. Um, I'd like to see it as an institution that is stopping deterioration from taking place of knowledge. It's an institution that is removing obstructions. So it's not prescriptive. And if there's a principle that I personally would favor, it is simply the removal of obstructions in the creative process in this country, which is very different from prescribing what is required in this country. And I bring this principle to you from an old teacher of mine, Amartya Sen, for whom the process of economic development was basically trying to liberate freedoms. And this principle of removing obstruction was something that I had long discussions and evolved with him. In fact, it was evolved for the slums in Bombay, the study that I was doing there, which is essentially how do you look at the enormous creative entrepreneurial talent which exists in the slums. You don't give them loans. You don't set up shops for them. They are 10 times more capable of doing things that they are doing at the moment. You remove obstructions and let them out, let them free. And I certainly would suggest to Neville that Ocean thinks about this very, very carefully and formulates a completely different kind of institution, not one that has any worldview, any shared view, any of some of that stuff. The advantage of removing obstructions is that you address yourself to enormous number of microscopic problems at the same time, whereas you have no formula for the outcome of what's going to come out of this. Let it just come out. Thanks very much.